Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we got a couple of things to discuss, including a signing, a couple of waiver updates, some injury updates around the NHL, and I'm going to give you my predictions for the 5 most likely goaltenders to be moved in season this year. I'm going to do all that coming up right now. Hello and welcome to another video here at the Internet Hockey Channel. Before I start this video, remember to like this video and subscribe down below. We are so close to 200 subscribers, so thank you for all of your support. I could never do it without all of you guys, so definitely don't forget to subscribe down below. Now, as usual, I'm going to kick things off today by discussing signings from around the NHL. There's only been one signing over the past couple of days, but it has been a really good signing, as there has been a Boston Bruin player who has been signed to his ELC. As the Boston Bruins have signed left defenseman Jackson Edwards, who was a 7th round pick back in the 2022 draft, to a 3-year ELC. He gets a 3-year ELC with the AAV of $860,000, and the deal should probably start maybe this year, but most likely next year. Edwards has been doing really well over in juniors. 25 points in 65 games last year in the OHL as a good young prospect. This year, definitely had a better start, had 6 points in 10 games for the OHL's London, and looks really good, so good thing there to get his ELC done. He hasn't been drafted overly long time ago. He wasn't a guy who was drafted this past year, but to see a 7th round pick get an ELC this quick is pretty good for him. Definitely, I think Edward looks really good. I think he could be eventually a solid third pair defenseman for the Boston Bruins. Still going to need a couple of years. I think he'll probably need 1 or 2 more years in the OHL, then probably 2 years in the AHL, so probably still about 2, 3, maybe 4 years away from competing for an NHL roster spot, but when he's ready, he'll be a solid third pair defenseman in my opinion. He looks really good. He looks like a really good steal from the Boston Bruins in round 7 of the 2022 draft, and I think he's going to be a really good player. So good to see the Boston Bruins were able to get him to his ELC. I think he'll be a fantastic Bruin eventually. Like I said, still going to need some time, but he's looked really well in the OHL this year so far, putting up 6 points in 10 games. I think if he can continue that point pace, he should definitely have a better season than last year, and I think that that's a really good signing in my opinion. Jackson Edwards in Boston, 3 years, $860 ELC. That's a fantastic deal in my opinion. I think eventually, if he can continue to play like he has this past year, I think he should be a fantastic fit in Boston long term. So really good signing there for the Boston Bruins to sign their 2022 7th round pick to his ELC. So really good to see that the Boston Bruins will sign their 2022 7th round pick to his ELC. We do have one quick waiver update here. We don't know what the solution was for the waiver update here, as it's not been a day yet since it happened. It's still a couple of hours from the recording of this video until the waiver updates are going to happen, so I'm not exactly sure if he's wound up clearing or he was claimed, but the Boston Bruins placed the defenseman Ian Mitchell on waivers, so I'm not overly surprised. Mitchell's barely been able to get into any NHL action this year. He's a very solid, in my opinion, 6th, 7th defenseman. He was acquired by the Boston Bruins in the Taylor Hall trade. The Bruins gave up Paul and Foligno to Chicago in exchange for Regula and Mitchell. Regula was placed on waivers before the season started and has been playing in the AHL to start the year. Mitchell's looked good in his few games of NHL action with the Boston Bruins, but the Bruins have a really deep defense, including guys like Shattenkirk, Grzelcyk, Carlo, Forbert, a lot of guys on that defensive end who are really good, so I'm not overly surprised Mitchell's being placed on waivers. He's a decent, like I said, 6th, 7th defenseman. I could definitely see a team who's really needs a defenseman or could use more of a younger defenseman and has a spot on their roster, maybe claim him. Mitchell doesn't have to play in every single game, but he could definitely be a solid third pair defenseman at times for a team, so I could definitely see a team be interested in him. I think he could be definitely a solid waiver claim, so I would not say that he is guaranteed to be cleared, but that being said, he's not overly expensive, so another reason why I think he could get claimed, but he's also young. He hasn't been overly fantastic at the NHL level, especially during his time in Chicago. He's been more of an AHL player. He's a fringe NHL player at best right now. Like I said, 6th, 7th defenseman. So I do think that there's a possibility that he does wind up clearing. I think there's a possibility that teams don't really want to take him. They already know that he's not overly great at the NHL level. So I could see a scenario where a younger team, maybe a team who needs a defenseman, like maybe Anaheim, for instance, or a couple of other teams who could use a defenseman, maybe someone who has an injury right now, maybe they claim Mitchell for the short term, or maybe they try and claim Mitchell and try and get him into the lineup. So I definitely think it's possible, but I also wouldn't be surprised if there are no teams who take him and Mitchell winds up clearing waivers and going to be sent down to the AHL. So it's going to be interesting to see. I definitely love to hear your guys' thoughts. Does Mitchell clear waivers or is he claimed? I definitely love to hear your guys' thoughts. By the time this makes to YouTube, we'll probably already know, but If it hasn't, then I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on if you do think that he does claim or if he winds up clearing. Definitely love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. A couple of injury updates to talk about here from around the NHL. Not abundance of injury updates here, but definitely a couple. David Savard has been diagnosed with a hand injury. I think he went for surgery, if I'm correct. I'm not exactly sure on that, but he's going to be out for the next 2 months. So it's another big blow to the Montreal Canadiens defense. David Savard's out now. I think goalie's out for a couple of games as well. Their blue line continues to get injured. The Canadiens continue to get bitten by the injury bug. It continues to hurt this team left and right. So horrible news for the Montreal Canadiens. Then you also have Jeff Petrio's upper body injury is out day-to-day for the Canadiens. Not overly good there. John Ludwig took a big hit in that Dallas-Pittsburgh game that we talked about in our game review video. He took a huge monster hit, left the game. He's out with a concussion right now, and he's going to be out indefinitely. So I'm not overly shocked that he's going to be out for a long period of time. He was slow to get up. Really bad for Ludwig in his NHL debut, I think it was. So really, really bad news there for the Penguins. But he's going to be out for the next little while. And Mrazek has an undisclosed injury. He's going to be out for an unknown period of time. But then all of these players who I'm about to mention here have been cleared to play and were able to get back into game action. Philip Kurashev with the Chicago Blackhawks, Eric Holla with New Jersey Devils, Chase Wheatcroft with Dallas Stars, who was sent back to minors. He started on season opening injury reserve. Zach Benson with the Buffalo Sabres, Sebastian Aho and Frederik Andersen with the Carolina Hurricanes, Derek Forbort with the Boston Bruins, Pavel Buchnevich with the St. Louis Blues, and Michael Carcone with the Arizona Coyotes. All those guys were cleared to play and get back into NHL action, so really good news there. Alex Barabanov has a finger injury. He's going to be out for an unknown period of time. That's a really bad blow for San Jose. He's a solid top 6 forward. Jeremy Poirier, who I think was playing the AHL, has an arm injury. He's going to be out indefinitely. Poirier is probably one of the best Flames prospects on the defensive end. So horrible news to see him go out for an injury. Hopefully he's going to be back in the not-too-distant future. Alex Nedeljkovic has a lower body injury and is out week to week, so Penguins are going to be without their backup for the next couple of weeks. Brett Pesce, who we said was out a little while ago due to a lower body injury, he's going to be out for the next 2 to 4 weeks due to an injury. I think he had surgery as well, so not overly great news for Pesce. He's a solid top for the defensive defenseman, a guy who the Carolina Hurricanes could definitely use in that lineup with their defensive problems so far this year. So to have him out over the lineup is not overly great. Igor Chinnikov was cleared to play with the Columbus Blue Jackets. Clean Costin was cleared to play by the Detroit Red Wings, so good to see that those two guys are back in the game action. Frederick Gaudreau's upper body injury for the Minnesota Wild. He's going to be out for an unknown period of time. Rasmus Sandin has an undisclosed injury. He's going to be out for an unknown period of time, so not good news to see Gaudreau and Sandin out for the next little while. And then Jacob Lauko's undisclosed injury. He's going to be out for a week for the Boston Bruins. And Milan Lucic has a lower body injury. He's out week to week for the Boston Bruins. So some really bad injury news for a couple of bomb 6 Bruins there, and Lauko and Lucic. So not really good news there. So definitely some good news on the injury front. There's a lot of players were able to get back into game action, so it's fantastic news to see. But for guys like Savard, who's going to be out for the next couple of months, for guys like Pesce, who's going to be out for the next 2 or 4 weeks, for Ludwig, who's going to be out indefinitely, for a guy like Nedeljkovic, who's out week to week right now, or Milan Lucic, who's out week to week right now. Really bad injury updates there for them. They're going to miss the next couple of weeks or possibly months, like Savard, and hopefully they're able to recover in the not-too-distant future, and they're now for an overly long period of time, but those are some pretty bad injury updates for those players over there. So going to be interesting to see, but those are the player updates there from around the NHL. And lastly here, I want to touch on a couple of possible goalie moves. Now, I think there's going to be a couple of goalie moves in season. I think there's a possibility we could see 3, maybe 4 in-season goalie moves from around the NHL. I think there are a handful of goalies here who could be moved. There's probably a lot more than just 5, but I do think there are 5 really good options, in my opinion, of players who could wind up being moved at the deadline. Like I said, Edmonton looks really awful right now, and if they continue to play like this, I would not be overly surprised if they went out to get a goaltending upgrade. The Kings, they could use a goaltending upgrade. They don't have too much cap space to work with, but if they're at their deadline, they're doing overly well. They want to upgrade on a guy like Copley or Talbot. I could see them go into the goalie market again this year and try and add a goaltender. There's a couple of other teams who I think could definitely use a goaltender as well, but definitely I'm going to list 5 candidates here, I think, who are very, very likely to be moved, and possibly one of the more likely destinations I could see them going. So first, at 5th overall, it could have gone a lot of ways here. I think one of Allen or Primo could be traded in the season. I think one of UPL or Commer, depending on what happens with Levi, could be dealt in season. I think a couple of pending UFAs, like a Campbell Kakinen, could be dealt here. I think there's another couple of other guys. Nedeljkovic, if the Penguins are not doing overly well and want to move him. If the Kings wind up acquiring a goalie, they could move a guy like Talbot or Copley. But at 5 position, I'm going with Peter Mrazek. Mrazek, I think, has had a pretty solid start to the season. I could sort of see him, like I've talked about in previous videos, being sort of the Jonathan Quick of this year. Someone who I think might not play a ton of games, but there's a little bit of insurance in case the team runs into injuries in the playoffs. I think Mrazek could definitely be a solid backup or third-string goaltender for a playoff contender. He started out really well this year for the Chicago Blackhawks, and I could see the Hawks possibly get like a 4th or 5th round pick for him. They won't get a whole bunch in return, but they would definitely be able to get something in return. And I think, given the fact they were paid to take Mrazek off of the Maple Leafs books, that would be a pretty solid return. So they could probably retain his salary, bump it down to I think like a $1.9 million cap hit. Mrazek at $2 million might work for some teams. Maybe they try and do a third-party retention to get the cap it down even lower. But I could definitely see teams who are in the playoffs or looking for some goaltending help, looking to strengthen that like backup position or the third string position, have some interest in Mrazek, who's actually had a really good start here. So I think Mrazek could definitely be a solid upgrade for a couple of teams. Maybe not as a starter. I don't think it would be a playoff starter, not after his injury history and all the stuff that he's gone through over the past couple of years. But I do think Mrazek could be a good backup third-string goaltender. If there are injuries, I think he could come in a playoff game and do really well. So Mrazek definitely, I think, is a possibility for a guy who's being moved. 4th, it'll be the Edmonton Oilers' Jack Campbell. Now, we'll get to this in a couple of minutes here, but I think Campbell, due to the fact that the Oilers will probably try and upgrade the goaltending if they cannot continue to do well, I think Campbell will be moved in a bigger trade package for whatever the Oilers goalie upgrade winds up being. I think they would have to move Campbell back to the team who they're acquiring a goalie from. Campbell, not overly great start to the year. Last year, he didn't have an overly great start either, but Skinner's play on top of the Oilers' scoring abilities were able to get the Oilers a ton of wins, especially early on. But this year, he's not done overly well, and I do think that could lead to him being traded. He has 4 years left this year plus 3 more at a $5 million cap hit. I'm not exactly sure what teams will be interested in, so that's why I said it might have to be in a bigger trade package. The Oilers may have to give up more things to not only offload Campbell, but to bring in a new goaltender. So I could definitely see the Oilers trade Campbell to whatever team the Oilers are able to get that new starting goaltender from. So I definitely think Campbell is definitely a possibility of it being traded. Like we talked about in the offseason, if the Oilers have a bad start, which they have, if it continues a bad start for the Oilers, they are not going to do overly well. They're going to look for an upgrade in nets, and if they look for an upgrade in nets, I think it's quite simply put, they're going to move Campbell. So I think Campbell is a very likely candidate to be moved before a deadline. Now the top 3 picks are 3 guys who I think are extremely likely to be moved by the trade deadline. Number 3 would be Dan Vladar. Vladar's had an up and down start to the year, not overly fantastic for the Calgary Flames, but we know what the Flames' position is on this. They like Vladar, he's a good player, he's a very good 1B backup for the Markstrom, but they want Wolf in the NHL. Wolf's a solid goaltender, he's a goalie of the future for the Flames. In a couple of years' time, he will be their starter, in my opinion. So they want to get him into some NHL action. The only way they're able to do that is if they are able to move Dan Vladar to another team. So that's going to be interesting to see if they wind up moving Vladar or if they wind up keeping Vladar. I think it's quite possible that for the time being, Vladar will have to remain with the Calgary Flames after his not overly great start to the season. Plus his cap hit, 2.3 cap hit for this year and next year, really is not overly great to trade right now. But I think at some point, whether it be earlier in this year, whether it be like a December or January trade, or it'll be closer to the March trade deadline, I think Vladar will get moved. I think the Flames are going to be able to move him at some point. And after they move him, they'll be able to bring up Dustin Wolf. I think the most likely fit for Vladar at this point in time is Buffalo. Buffalo looks like a really good team. I could see him looking to try and strengthen their goalie position. So if they don't have confidence in Comrie or UPL, and they could definitely use another goaltender with Levi, I could see the Sabres try and package up something like a 2nd-round pick or a 3rd-round pick, and maybe Eric Comrie, and move them to Calgary for Vladar. And with them already having Wolf there, I don't think they will be opposed to putting Comrie on waivers and having him as the 3rd stringer. So it'll be interesting to see, but I definitely do think that that's a sort of trade that I think could definitely work for both sides. But I think Buffalo will probably be one of the more likely options for Vladar. Maybe another team would be like a LA Kings. Maybe there's a couple of other teams. But I do think Vladar is a very likely trade candidate. Vladar is a really good goaltender. I think he could be a fantastic 1B backup goaltender for a team who has a more starter-type goaltender. But I definitely think he's a fantastic goaltender who could definitely do well in a team like a Buffalo who could definitely use like a 1B goaltender. But I think the Flames will find a way to move on from Vladar and wind up getting Wolf into the lineup at some point in time. At number 2, I have the Ducks' John Gibson. John Gibson's not done overly well to start the year. His save percentage is not overly great. With the Ducks, he's not done overly well. Those styles actually done quite well with Anaheim, and even though they've not done overly well to start the year, I think those styles keep them in a lot of the games that they shouldn't be in. Gibson's not doing overly well. The Ducks don't have a great defense. I think this is now Joe Stahl's team. I don't think Gibson's now the starter, in my opinion. I think Joe Stahl's more of like the 1A. Gibson's closer to being the 1B. So I think this is Joe Stahl's team, and with Joe Stahl being the starter, I could see the Ducks try and move Gibson now. And we know that he's probably wanted out for a while now, but it sounds like it could be even more likely right now. Gibson's a solid player. I could definitely see a lot of teams have interest in him. His cap hit's going to make it really difficult to make an in-season trade, so this might be a trade that happens in the offseason, but I think he has like a $6.4 million cap hit for this year, plus I think either 2 or 3 more. So he's definitely got a lot of term on it. So I think there could definitely be some interest in a guy like John Gibson. A team, in my opinion, who I think would be a fantastic fit will be the LA Kings. If they could find a way to make the contract work, I think the Kings would be a fantastic fit for a guy like John Gibson. Gibson would be a solid starter for the Kings that they need. And I think with the Kings being a team who I think is destined to make the playoffs, I think Gibson could definitely get some playoff action. I think that would be a really good thing for him. So it'll be interesting to see, but I do think Gibson in LA is a possibility. Maybe there's a couple of other teams. Edmonton, I think, could definitely have it. If the Devils still aren't too sure about their goaltending, maybe they could go after Gibson. But I do think if they can make the cap work, Gibson could be definitely a possible trade deadline acquisition for a team. So it'll be interesting to see, but with those style playing so well right now, I think the Ducks would probably more likely want like a 1B backup goaltender rather than a $6.4 million Gibson as their backup. And I think with Dostal playing so well, Gibson, either at this point in time, the trade line, or in the offseason next year, wind up being moved at some point. And then first here, a guy who I think it's very likely to get traded either this year or at the offseason will be Carter Hart. Hart has had a fantastic start to the season. He's definitely done really well. He's kept Philadelphia in games they probably shouldn't be in. He's helped them have a really good record to start the season. But we know that the Philadelphia Flyers' future is Sam Ersson. Ersson's had a fantastic couple of games. He's looked a little bit shaky. He's not gone into a ton of NHL action this year. But Ersson, the Philadelphia Flyers are really high on. They viewed him as their goalie of the future. They like what Ersson brings to the NHL team. So I definitely think in time Ersson will be the starter. But I definitely think Hart could definitely be a move. There was a lot of talk this offseason Hart was going to be moved. There was a lot of talk around last year in season that he was going to be moved. Hart, in my opinion, is going to be extremely interesting name to watch out for. Now, he's still part of that 2018 World Junior team. We still don't know what's going to happen there. If he's suspended, no team will want to be taking him on. So, given all that uncertainty around that 2018 World Junior team, I'm not exactly sure how many people will really want him. But if he winds up being cleared off of that 2018 World Junior team and being found innocent, then I think there's an extremely likely possibility Hart gets moved. Hart's putting up fantastic numbers, and a place I could see him go would be the Edmonton Oilers, because he is from Alberta. I think he could be a fantastic fit with Edmonton. Imagine Carter Hart and the Edmonton Oilers. I think he could definitely backstop the Oilers a lot better than Campbell or Skinner are doing right now. So we also know Hart's entering the final year of his deal. In the offseason, he'll need an extension. Does he really want to extend with a team who's trying to be a rebuilding team right now? I don't think so. So I think if he's not dealt at the deadline, he's going to be an interesting name to watch out for in season. I think Hart is definitely a likely option to possibly be moved at some point in time. So it'll be interesting to see, but I expect Hart to be moved, if not at the deadline, then in season. And I think there's a very likely chance that a team like Edmonton, who could be his hometown team, could wind up being a team who ends up getting him. But it'll be interesting to see. I just think with Hart's fantastic start to the season and all of the offseason rumors that we saw surrounding a Hart trade, I think eventually he will get dealt in the next little while. So it'll be interesting to see. But whether it's at the deadline, the offseason, I think Hart will get dealt. And I think Edmonton is an extremely likely option. Definitely. Let's hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments. What other goalies do you think could be moved in season? Like I said, I think Hart, possibly Edmonton, Gibson possibly to LA, Vladar possibly to Buffalo, Campbell possibly to a team who winds up giving the Oilers a goaltender, Mrazek, who's a pending UFA, I think would be a good backup third stringer for a team, add some playoff depth. I think those are the 5 most likely ones. I definitely have to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments. Who do you think are the more likely goalies to be dealt? Could there be a couple of other guys? Like I said, I think Kakkonen could be a guy, Alan Primo, UPL, or Comrie. I think there's a couple of other guys who could be moved. But definitely, I'll your guys' thoughts down in the comments on which goalies you think will be moved in season. But definitely, that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video, and if you really like to, remember to subscribe down below. We're so close to 200 subscribers, so I'll never be able to do this without all of you guys' support. So thank you, and don't forget to continue to subscribe. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So if you check that out, I'll link to that in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.